But I want to make sure that I've answered your questions. But there's important things to talk about. And so make no mistake, I'm Janice Arnold Jones. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives, and I want your vote. Who is not registered here?
Really?
What? John, you work on North Carolina.
Yeah, I'm North Carolina. Yeah.
But you're registered.
Yeah.
You're registered. Okay, that's good.
I'm not all over here.
Well, it takes like 2 minutes to be registered.
Well, I'm saying, so if you are, just a reminder, going into this primary season, if you live out of state, make sure you request your absentee ballot. And start now, because if you want to say and how your country is progressing, you have a voice. So just make sure you do that. So I am running for the U.S. House of Representatives because we live in the greatest, most innovative, most caring nation in the history of the world. And people say, why are you running? It's real simple. I am determined that the blessings that we live by, the blessings of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, will be passed on to my children, that will be you guys, and my grandchildren that I don't have yet. And the problem is, all that we love is in grave jeopardy. Now, my husband John and I grew up in New Mexico. We're your neighbors. We raised our children here. We are Lobos. We both graduated from the University of New Mexico. And for those of you who don't know, I probably got my start in policy and politics right here. I served on ASUNM as a student senator and then as the vice president of the student body. Back when we did things a little bit differently, we could actually make money, and we did a lot of, we can talk about that later. But suffice to say, I am very proud to be a citizen and a citizen legislator of the state of New Mexico. You know, we have everything we need right here, right now, to create wealth and prosperity. We can bring New Mexico to the forefront of the great energy recovery, a recovery desperately needed by our nation. Energy means jobs. New Mexico has an established role in national defense, satellite communication, and space. This means jobs. We have everything we need right here, right now, to create the nuclear renaissance, and this means jobs. In Congress, I will work to address the crippling regulations. No one will work harder than I will every day in Congress to address the debt and the deficit. The tax code. The tax code must be reorganized. It must be simple, fair, and easy to apply. I will be relentless about cutting spending. I will work to achieve a real energy policy for our nation. I have the legislative experience, the triumphs, and the battle scars to show for my service. I did my on-the-job training on the battlefield of the New Mexico State Legislature. I achieved transparency. As a member of the minority, I worked hard to write and pass fair legislation. I battled to prevent the siphoning of taxpayer dollars from going where it wasn't supposed to go. And along the way, I honed a very sensitive BS meter. Important skill. But when I'm in Congress, there is one job to do, and that is to rebuild our economy and our republic. I refuse to leave you in the rubble of a welfare state. We have an important question in front of us. Opportunity and freedom, or European-style socialism? Today is the day to stand up and be counted. Today is the day to join us in the fight to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. I need your help. I need your time. I need your talent. If you have any money, I need that too. Because we are not going to change things in Washington unless you get involved. This is your country. It is a great country, and it can only be great if you participate. So I would be honored.
Howdy.
Oh, how are you? Oh my, oh my, oh my. Anyway, so let me just sum up, because I would much rather have a discussion with you. But today's the time. This is, you have to get involved. So I would be honored to answer your questions.
All right.
Hey, I gotta go back to work over here and stand in
God
front
bless
of
you, New
trackers.
Mexico and the United States of America. I am Janice Arnold, send me to Washington.
All right. We'll do what we can.
Okay.
So one of your biggest platform, or issues on your platform is, of course, energy. Can you elaborate more on that?
Oh, sure. You know,
That's definitely a key issue for you.
well, in so many ways. So I don't want to make anybody's eyes roll. So if you don't know, I have been allied with or worked with the energy industry for a number of years. For those of you who don't know, I have been a DOE contractor for about 12 years. And so it is all related to energy. But my service in the legislature helps me to see exactly how broad a role this will play. You know, we have tremendous natural resources. Those resources include oil and natural gas. We have wind and solar. We have geothermal. But we also have something else that is often not discussed when we are talking about energy, and that is rare earth elements. Who knows what a rare earth element is? Oh, good. Some of you do. How many of you have a cell phone? You better hope we have some rare earth elements, because we cannot make cell phones without them. And here's the problem. China cut us off about, 2.5 months ago from using their rare earth elements. It just happens the state of New Mexico has 13% of the world's deposits of rare earth elements right here in New Mexico. So have you heard of us extracting any of those things? Mining them? Building an industry around them? These are things that we can do today, right now, and it is vital not only for the communications industry, it's vital for national defense. And your televisions, it ain't happening without it. So, and by the way, the glass part of most solar panels also contain rare earth elements. So here is a burgeoning industry. We need to get out of the way and actually get with the program and be competitive. Now that is just one piece, it's a very small piece. I mentioned the nuclear renaissance happening in southeastern New Mexico. How many of you have been to Eunice? Oh, cool. Cool. How many of you actually know where Eunice is? Okay. It is. It's outside of Haas. So a very interesting thing happened, and it started back in 1999, so this is not new. But an international company called LES was looking for a place to locate. We actually make and manufacture enriched uranium in southeastern New Mexico, in Eunice. Now, I won't go into the details, but I promise you that what they make at the end of the manufacturing process, I can hold in my hand, and I have done so. And so you need to make sure that you take your chemistry and some engineering courses to know what I'm talking about. But we are doing that in New Mexico. It took until the second expansion for the U.S. to even be able to purchase the rods that they were making, because they were fully subscribed outside of our nation. And I'm going to bet that most of you have not even heard of LES, or the National Enrichment Facility. That is happening in Eunice, New Mexico, and they have invested well over $2 billion out in the middle of the desert, because we have the technology and the know-how, and we are recruiting more exiting Navy personnel to come to southeastern New Mexico, because they have the training to actually do the work. The other things that are happening in southeastern New Mexico is international isotopes. There is a very small waste stream off of the National Enrichment Facility. The waste stream can actually be captured to create medical products. It's a very interesting program. It's called deconversion. Another 250 jobs after the program is built. Oh, by the way, speaking of energy, and I know you think, well, how are you talking about energy? I'm talking about all these other things, because they don't stand by themselves. Our nation is dependent upon the rest of the world for medical isotopes. Right now, we produce 5% of our needs at the University of Missouri. Because we have these other facilities, it is appropriate, and I believe necessary, for New Mexico to start leading the way in the development of a new medical isotopes facility. Has anybody had any diagnostic tests? Anybody have older parents who need diagnostic tests?
Just me.
This would be true. This would be true. Anyway, so they have a shelf life. We have the technology to do this. And I don't want you to think that there aren't any medical isotopes being actually created and processed. We actually have 2 centrifuges here at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center, but it only produces something called FA18. It's a specific isotope for breast cancer research. So in terms of other diagnostic tests, not helpful. These are all the things that we can and should be doing in the state of New Mexico. All of that is related to energy. And so I'm going to tie that back around to how many of you have been north of Clovis? How many of you know where Clovis is? So there is another piece of energy that's happening for our state. It's called Thessaloniki. It will be the 3rd national interconnect, which actually connects our grid together. That is actually being placed outside of Clovis because it allows ERCOT, which is all of Texas, FERC East and FERC West, these are the 2 other electrical grids that actually come together at this point. There are so many other opportunities for us to actually expand jobs, but also increase the stability of our electrical grid, and it's right here in New Mexico. So we are energy, and it's time that we start telling the rest of the nation, this is what we do. We do a lot of other things too. It's amazing what our state does, but we really have the resources to step up and contribute to our nation. And that, I apologize, was a very long answer, but it was a really good question.
Well, especially us being younger, there's the Supreme Court battle right now that just finished up arguments, and they already voted on it. They're working on their opinions. But
how do you think they voted?
Well,
do you have a pool?
I think the president, based off of the president's comments today, I think he's shaking in his boots. It's coming. So that bill as a whole, I think, has a huge impact on our generation.
Oh, I agree.
And so what do you think about the bill? What are some measures that you're kind of eyeing if this probably Justice Kennedy decides to repeal it or decides to uphold it?
Well, I have a lot of opinions from inception to the ending. So at the beginning and the end of the day for me is the question, is health care a right? And I'm going to take a poll. Is health care a right?
No.
I happen to be in that position. So I believe that health care is your responsibility. I believe that. Do I believe that there are people who need us as neighbors and also as a nation to step up to provide that care? Absolutely. And if you've ever heard me discuss DD waivers in our state, I believe that. I believe that there are times where catastrophic care is not only necessary and required, but we as a community will come together to do that. This health care plan doesn't talk about that at all. I believe that and PPOC, and I always forget what that stands for, it is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. That was good. On the face of it, was unconstitutional. On the face of it, I was absolutely horrified, having been a legislator, that any leader would say, in order for you to know what is in the bill, you must pass it. You will never see me voting for a bill that I have not read, and I have a record of standing up to the leadership, and it happened to me in the House of Representatives here, when an amendment was brought in that no one had read, that it was clear that it was not time for me to read it. I not only pitched a fit, I promise you I will do so. And it's a hard stance. I don't care how good a bill it is. If we are not allowed to do our job, my vote is no. And I just wish that we didn't have to do it that way. But you know what? You are sending me to Washington to know what I'm voting on. And so here's what was in PPOCA that was truly troubling. It is the only piece of legislation that requires you to buy a product. It requires you to buy a product. I got a call from a friend who's my age, of a different political persuasion. He says, why are you guys so mad about this? You're required to buy a car if you want to get around any place, if you live in the western United States. Any of you required to buy a car? Now, if you buy a car, do we require that you buy something else? Most states do, but it's not a federal mandate. And so the corollaries kind of fall apart there. I mean, do you think that's a reasonable?
Well, I was just gonna, they always bring up this whole, you have to buy insurance if you have a car, but you don't have to buy insurance to own a car. You have to buy insurance to operate it on public roads. There's a difference there, rather than having to buy something because for the good of the nation. It's a totally different concept there.
And at the end of the day, it's a state
Right.
law, not federal law.
Also, if I might chime in, driving is not a right, it's a privilege, and so they can regulate it however they want. And in New Mexico, you have to be able to, if you're not driving the car, if it's not being used on a regular basis, you have to sign an affidavit saying it's not being used on a regular basis. So it's a little bit more constraining here if you just want to own a car and not drive it. It's a little bit different than other states, but.
Well, as I was talking with this individual, because he was a little bit angry about the fact that there are conservatives who believe that it is an individual's responsibility to take care of themselves. Truly. I wished I had gotten through to the question of, so what if in New York City we required everybody to buy a car? What do you think? I would say because if you, for those of you who lived on the eastern side of the country, how was that for them?
Hey, I didn't even own a car when I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, so.
My daughter's in
That's
Philadelphia
crazy.
right now, and finding a parking place is probably one of the greatest challenges. But, so, I think that the government is off track when you require us to buy a specific product. But the other pieces of the health care bill that I read were really troubling, actually took actions that I believe should have been in standalone legislation. I do not believe that a portion of the proceeds of the sale of your home should have ever been in this bill, even if you thought that that was the best way to fund it, and from a funding formula, it was a really, really bad way to fund it. So all of those pieces combined together, I sincerely hope that the Supreme Court will rule that this was unconstitutional. We need to start again, because I don't believe there's any way to save PPACA as a piece of legislation, even if you had read it all. Well, I had actually read the first set, the 2,400 pages, but after that, I don't know if you remember, they voted for the bill and added on in a motion that an amendment of over 400 pages would be added after the fact. I actually cannot discern what those amendments were. That bothers me. That truly bothers me. And when U.S. citizens cannot easily and ably see what we are voting on, I think that is the wrong move. I think in this day of technology, you have a right to know. There's no excuse for saying, well, you just couldn't get there in time. No excuse. And so to hide pieces of legislation or action inside of a bill, I think those days are gone. I hope they are.
Can you talk maybe about your stance on capital gains specifically, because I know of the presidential candidates that have taken different stances on specifically capital gains and what point should be lowered after a certain income, and what your stances are on that?
Well, I would say, so let's start with just tax policy.
Okay.
Because I actually like tax policy. I sat on the tax committee for 8 years, and my position has changed dramatically. And so I believe the taxes should be low, broad, fair, easy to understand, and easy to apply. And if it takes me more than about 3 sentences to explain a piece of tax policy to you, what I've learned is chances are you're going to pay a lot, and somebody else someplace else is going to make out because of it. It's a bad way to do taxation. And if ever there was a time to simplify our tax code, this is the time. So we have a very complex, convoluted tax code that has made capital gains cheap in some ways. Right now, capital gains is limited to 15%, but at the end of the year, that rate will go up, and help me, if it goes up to 35% again?
25 to 35.
Somebody correct me, I think it goes to 35%. So where is your incentive to say, where's your incentive to prosper? I don't have any problem leveling a tax rate across the board, but when you are being penalized for being productive, I think that's wrong, and I think we should find other ways to tax. One of the other things, the corporate tax rate for repatriating profits from overseas is the highest in nearly all of the world. If you're wondering why we are not rebuilding our manufacturing industries, it's because the incentive and the advantage to return home has gone away. And so I am looking for low, broad, fair, easy to understand, easy to administer. And you should not have to guess at the beginning of the year what your tax burden is going to be, nor should you have to hire very high-priced lawyers or CPAs to gain an advantage. I believe that the tax policy should level the playing field, and there are really interesting ways to do that, and I intend to make that case in Congress. So the people at IRS may lose their job, they may, but, you know, and I'm very careful, I don't want to be flippant about the fact that our tax policy could be significantly simpler. But we have other agencies that simply are not sufficiently staffed. And the agencies that deal with immigration and naturalization is a very good example.
Okay, so I have a question. There's been a lot of stuff the past few weeks.
Go on.
Thank you, Chelsea. The past few weeks, there's been a lot of reports about a pretty large gender gap, especially in the swing states, whereas, you know, women are voting less Republican and more Democratic. Is there a reason for that, you think, and what do you think should be done about that, or could be done about that?
Boy, I hope that's not true.
That's what Wall Street Journal's reporting.
Really?
I've been reading that lately.
10%.
In a lot of the swing states.
Yeah.
Oh, fun. Well, you know, and so I'm going to ask my colleagues here to help answer that. So I'm going to take a guess if that is starting to happen. You know, I think there's a shift going on in our country. And part of the shift is I am tired of having people who are asking to be my representative who are passing out pamphlets. And I think that women in particular just don't want to listen to us. And gentlemen, I do apologize, but if you think you can win our vote on three simplistic positions, we're not there. And I want details. So I'm guessing that may be part of it, but I don't want to speak for everybody else. What do you think?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you why other women or why. I mean, I live in a house with 56 other girls, and I couldn't tell you.
Okay, that's fair.
So I mean, I don't know. I think I could speak for Sue Ginch that she, sorry, Elizabeth. Sorry, I do that all the time, sorry. That, I don't know, I think there's some of us that are opinionated, and some might could tell you that girls are lazy sometimes just as much.
So, but why do you think women would gravitate to the Democratic candidates more than the Republican candidates? I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think, like, having to be like, the way I see it would be like, oh yeah, well, my husband's gonna vote conservative because he's boring, and I'm hip and I'm young, so I'm gonna vote Democratic. That's how I see it.
I mean, maybe I'm just a little bit cynical, but I think there's a lot of it has to do with, like, just, like, being in college and being, I don't know, being of this age group. You get a lot of, like, strange feminist propaganda.
Yeah.
Not like, as in, I feel like women should be empowered and things like that, but, like, when we get to the point where we're sort of, like, maybe on more equal playing field, there is a lot of, like, media and literature that kind of sways you to think that it's still not that way, and you have to try harder, and, like, the man tries to keep you down. I think, like, a lot of people our age kind of receive that in like, college, just based on, like, education being, like, a little more liberal. So I think they tend to think sort of, like, from a more, like, minority perspective, and think that, like, the Democratic Party is giving them more benefits and giving them a leg up on, like, the traditional, like, way society is, and that's really not the case at all. Like, women really are not as oppressed as the media would like us to believe. But that's just my opinion.
Actually, I think, like, I was actually thinking that while we were talking, and I have to agree with that 100%.
Like, when they're, like, some of the, like, I say propaganda, but that's probably a little bit rude. Some of, like, the talks that do go on about, like, empowering women and, like, taking a stand, it also, like, comes from like a place that's usually like against the Republican Party or like against traditional values and things like that. So people are kind of leading the conversation to believe that in order to be like a modern woman or a successful woman, you really can't have conservative values. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it makes me, I have to go, so why would they think that? I struggle with that.
It's women's studies class.
But I think that, and I have not read the articles, but what I think they may be saying is, and I do know a lot of women who may respond to this, who believe candidates in particular when they say, we're going to take care of you. And do you think as people, women are lazier, do you really want somebody else to make the decisions for you, or do you think we're more vulnerable to that type of a sales pitch that we will say yes to? Well, sure, you can take care of me. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. But I don't know. I agree with what you were saying about that. I don't even know where to start with this whole thing. The whole traditional values and all of that. But
I think it does go back to like, I mean, not necessarily the end-all be-all opinion, but I kind of do agree with like this whole sort of like separate spheres mentality, which, I mean, if there was a feminist in the room, she'd probably slit my throat. But I mean, I do think that we're capable of the same things and we're capable of the same success, but women do things differently than men, and I think it's easier for women to break down when we talk about healthcare and someone says, okay, so if a child comes in and doesn't have healthcare, just going to let him die, or like something like that. And I think it's easier for women to just be like, no, like absolutely not. So I think it does come down to like conservative values being in that like you don't get something that you don't deserve, like you earn the things that you have, and it's sometimes maybe hard for like this gender to say no and to like cut the emotional side of it that a lot of like Democratic candidates kind of like play towards.
Yeah.
It's like the emotional side, and are you really going to do this to your neighbor? Are you really going to do that, and like, do you really not want them to have the same things you have? Like, I think that appeals to women a lot more. Like, I don't think that they know how, not they or we, but I think it's harder for them to like mentally discern like right and wrong, and gray areas are a lot easier for women to fall in, and they're more easily persuaded, maybe.
Okay, so gentlemen, we've had our say. What do you think?
I think.
What do you think? You tell us, please.
I think honestly, the Democrats have really done I have to give them props here, actually. They've done a really good job at formulating and coming up with their talking points for the women group. They know what works, they know what doesn't work, and they've done a good job with it, and they know what to say, what they want to hear. I mean, they go along with the stereotypical, if you ask like the stereotypical, conservatives think, men put down women, we're racist, there's gen that they've really tried to stick to the Republican Party. And I think there's groups that they've done it better at than others. I mean, it's funny because if you talk to a Democrat, just anyone, none in particular, but generally they'll say, well, we're for women's rights, you guys aren't, and we're for the rights of other groups of people, and I'm like, well, look at New Mexico. We had the first Hispanic female governor, and she's a Republican, and she's a hardline conservative. And so it's just, there's so many things that are just that fly in the face of what they say that I think that more people have bought into their talking points than actually looked at what the situation really is. Because I think Governor Martinez is the perfect example of that, of just flying in the face of every stereotype they tried to throw at the Republican Party. And I hope that if we get more things like her happening, like Senator Marco Rubio, I think people will start to see, oh wait, maybe they aren't so evil. And I do think that of the two, even ironic part is of the two sides, I think the Republican Party is the most diverse ideologically. I think we're far more diverse than the left is ideologically. And so I think that flies in the face of that too.
So, following that line of thought, so why do you think it may be more difficult for Republicans, especially in New Mexico, to get their message out?
I think it really comes down to talking points. They're still writing the we were trying to oppress African Americans. They still write that. Look, this is the party that was doing it. They don't buy hook, line, and sinker in every social welfare program because we say you guys can do it. Like, we'll help you as a neighbor. We'll help you get up there. And we think it's so much better and it's so much more rewarding when someone says, you know what, I did this on my own with the help of a neighbor. But I think it's too easy, the talking points are. And I really think that's what it comes down to. I know you saying that, but you can tag something to it. Someone sees at first, oh my gosh, they oppose this program, they must hate. And just like Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, we don't care about people's health. And that's what they throw out there, and some people buy it. And I don't know why it is. I wish people would just look, oh, this is a terrible decision. But, and then there's also people who just don't believe in it, and that's fine too. That's part of what makes our country great, but that's my little 2 cents. Maybe 5 cents.
I was just going to say I'm really happy that, I mean, you pretty much said what I was going to say, but I was hoping it would come from a woman's mouth. Not saying you're supposed to like that's just anti-feminist. Yeah.
I can assure you I'm a girl. I think it's just changing the conversation, honestly. Like, the conversation just got to change. Because, I mean, when you see certain members of minorities, like, especially like feminists, when you think, like, radical women's rights, you think, like, dreadlocks, yoga lady, you know what I mean? But, like, if you just change the conversation, like, that same person has, like, a super strong personality, a super strong stance, and you just change the conversation to mean, like, okay, well, don't you want to just prove them all wrong? Like, don't you want to just do it without anyone else's help? And I think that if the conversation was more geared that way, because I think the stereotype is it's like, no one can have my money, it's for me, it's not for you. But if you just, like, change it to be, like, an empowering conversation instead of, like, sort of that way, like, I think you would get, like, a lot more young people and a lot more, like, radical feminists, a lot more minorities if you're just like, well, we believe that you can do it. Like you were saying, like, we believe you can do it, and you're going to do it without anyone's help, and how much, like, better is it going to feel after that?
And so you just made me realize that there truly is a generational gap here. To me, I would never have said feminism is equated with dreadlocks. Burning bras, yeah, not dreadlocks.
They're saving water, too. That's what dreads are all about. I have it right here. I know what's going on.
But there is sort of a fundamental conversation that has to go on in our country, and there has been a period since the end of the Second War where we started to prosper, and somewhere along the line we got off track. And in our generosity, I think we decided that we could, then the government could, make a better decision for people than the people themselves. And what I believe the result of that perspective has been is disabling entire generations of people, literally disabling them. And I think you exactly hit it, that this is empowering. You have to make choices if you really want to take advantage of all of the opportunities that are in this country. And the easy way is to let somebody else make the choice. But you can really just do amazing things if you will make the choice. And I hope that your generation is actually at that point. But I worry about the rhetoric, because it does sound like the government can make a better decision for you. We can take care of you. And clearly, you all listen to all the discussion on contraception. And I have to just ask, gentlemen, if all of that is passed and that becomes a rule, so what does that do to your sex life if it so constrains a woman? And it just, so do you really want the government to go there? And it really is that fundamental. Can we have that discussion? And in the middle of all of this, there are some big issues facing our country. Let me go back to the stark reality. Honey, we're in debt up to our eyeballs. And to get out and to change the direction of our country is going to take some very tough choices. And so what I want to know from you, are you willing to sacrifice, when I say sacrifice, to endure what it is going to take to get our debt down. I'm not even saying eliminating it, but by 25% over the next 5 years. Are you willing to do that? Because it's not going to be easy. And there are going to be things that are, you know, as they say, people's oxes are going to get bored. That's what's going to happen because we have more debt than we have GDP per capita. So what kind of choices do you think we should be making? So I intend to go to Congress, and I'm going to be looking at balancing the budget. Right now, a budget just passed the House. I know people cheered. I didn't cheer. It was out of balance. What was it, 3.1 trillion?
2.5.
Was it?
Yeah, I was gonna say 3.6, that's good.
Well, I'd say that's where it was last year, but you know what? The projections are still put only 2.2 in revenue. I did the math. It's not good. Why are we doing this? And is that an important question to you?
Absolutely.
And I ask you that because, you know, sometimes when you talk about big numbers like that in Washington so far away, it's really like it's not real. But when you start adding up the taxes that are imposed on you, the limitations, you know, it really does affect your life.
Right. I mean, one issue that I've seen that a lot of politicians tend to kind of stray away from just because of the older generation being more inclined to vote is Social Security. I mean, I'm probably not going to see any of that, and I know Texas Governor Rick Perry, he got really chastised for comparing Social Security to a Ponzi scheme. And I mean, when you think about it, that's exactly what it is. And it seems like politicians are really don't want to step on any toes there because, I mean, the big portion of their voting pool is the people are the beneficiaries of Social Security right now.
So,
It seems bad to say, but I mean, I personally think that anyone that's running for any office that like tries to fake Social Security, whether it's right or wrong, I think that is probably a really risky political move. So I think it's hard to get any like change passed, and like because it's almost like a total thinker, I think, to try to mess with Social Security or Medicare or anything like that because it's gonna have some senior citizens up in arms.
I just think you have to hone the message and make sure you communicate it well. It's obviously something that has to be addressed.
And I think using the word Ponzi scheme probably wasn't as...
It is true, I should
In truth, I mean, you could fit the definition, but you have to be careful with it. You can't use such strong, language, because then people get turned off, because that's how you get those talking points, that's how you get them out there. I mean, they say, look, this is what it is.
If you're 85, you don't want something that you may or may not rely on, but perceived to be considered, equated with something so negative. So I think it's definitely a rhetoric issue. And I think if Republicans can hone the message, we can win the argument. You look at the mayor. Mayor Berry's done an excellent job. I mean, Marty left the city in financial ruin. And, his approval ratings are sky high. So I think you have to make sure you have the message and you make it clear to people what you're doing.
okay,
Just propose a budget. Increase government by less than 1%.
It also goes to show, how hard a welfare program is to get rid of once it's, an entitlement program is to get rid of once it's been enacted.
Okay, so do you see Social Security as an entitlement, and is it something that, I'm guessing from you don't think it's going to be here. If you don't think it's going to be here,
There's no way. Even the left knows it's not going to be here. It's just, what is the solution? What do we propose since we're the only ones that want to do something about it? What do we say? And, one idea I've heard that's reasonable, and if we could communicate it well, is, then let's phase it out. I mean, as a very elementary idea, you got to get more complex than that, because you can't just say phase it out and we're solved. But, our generation would take the pain from that, ultimately of phasing Social Security out, maybe turning it private, all the alternatives. But our generation is going to be dealing with so much. If we stay on the pace we're at, I've started to stop worrying about myself. I've started to start worrying about my kids that aren't even here yet, and what they're gonna have to deal with. And debt, I mean, what we're gonna have to deal with in debt, I can't even fathom it. I mean, we're going UNM on lottery, and we're like, oh, most of us on the New Mexico lottery, and we're like, well, we don't have any debt, but we all really do. We just don't feel it right now.
So as a group, would you respond to candidates on both sides of the aisle if we said, okay, if you are under 40, plan now, because in 5 years, we're going to phase out the payroll deduction for Social Security.
If you're under 25,
Yeah.
like, you need to plan. I think it's like weird, like millennials, quote unquote, like they say that we're one of the like most delusional generations of all time, kind of, like, because most of us, like, just like statistically, like they move out later, they like get their first job later, things like that, and I think you see a lot more of other generations preparing for retirement, even though they have Social Security, preparing more so than our generation, knowing that we're not going to probably, more than likely. I think that if you like polled this campus and asked how many people, even the 23-year-olds, like the ones that are still hanging around, like if you asked how many people had already started planning for retirement, I think that it would be like dangerously low, honestly, and I think that people don't, I think that our generation, I think that they are delusional in that all of this just seems so far away. Like, the debt seems far away, planning for retirement seems so far away, and I don't think that there's been, like, education that has, like, given our generation the tools to kind of acknowledge the fact that it starts now. That realistically, I think it started, I'm 21, I think it should have started 3 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? The numbers don't lie about, like, planning for retirement at 18 versus starting to plan for retirement at 40, you can invest the same amount. Like, I could be 20 and invest when I'm 40, and invest the same amount as someone who's 40 until I'm 60, and I'm obviously going to have quite a bit more money than the other, and I think folks don't realize how to plan and that we need to.
But you actually bring up kind of an interesting point, and that's saving. And so...
Which is not really...
I don't know that any of you are saving money. You know, it's a good thing to start to do. But right now, our government has actually made a tremendous disincentive to savings. You know, how many of you know how much money you're getting off of your savings right now? You know, and so why is that? And when you look at the Fed, do you think we should do something different about that? I'm very troubled about the low interest rate on savings. There is no incentive, and has that helped to stabilize our economy? What do you think?
I think, well, first of all, I wanted to respond to what you were saying, and what Mark was saying before is that Social Security, to me, is a non-issue. Like, if you've never paid into it, then you could cut it off and never get anything else. If you pay into it, that's an IOU from the government, and you need to get the money back. So the government simply said, we're going to stop requiring you to pay into it now, and you'll eventually get back what you put in. I think that's the only way you can do it lawfully. Right. But the problem is selling the message, and I think the only way you can really sell that message is if you create like this national awareness that Social Security has created like a level of dependency that people get used to, and you just know, well, you paid in, so you're going to get paid back. So what you need to do is you need to fight like an entitlement system from the little bit, like the little entitlements, like tuition, to larger entitlements like Social Security, and larger entitlements like quote-unquote free health care for everybody. That is just the biggest fallacy ever. But you need to start at the bottom and work your way up and create like a national awareness. And once there's a national awareness about what an entitlement is and why it's not good to create a dependency about it, it's easier to sell the big reforms to people than it is to sell the small. Than it is to sell it right now. Because to go on the air, like you were saying, and say, look, we want to reform Social Security. You can't say we want to stop it, because all of a sudden people are quaking in their boots. They're not receptive to the message, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, you show the shopping cart going off the cliff with
Yeah.
grandma and all these crazy
So, I'm sorry, I didn't want to...
I don't know, but I think you're thinking ahead. So even if we were able to start an effective campaign, how many years do you think it would take until we got to critical mass and we could really talk about the subject?
It'd take a generation.
I mean, it's about education. I mean, like Chelsea said, our generation has, finance teacher talks about it all the time, and jokes all the time about it, that our generation doesn't care enough to learn about it. Like, there's very
very small percentage of the population that even has a clue of percentage rates of savings in general. Like, I can tell you that they probably offer us 5 times, like every single time we go to the bank, to do this, this, and this, but I can tell you that 95% of the people that get offered it don't know even what it means, don't know how to use it, they don't, I mean, you can't expect even our generation to take a step in the right direction to let go of Social Security if you don't give them the tools to understand it, to save for themselves, in my opinion.
And I think this generation is really just total financial illiteracy. I mean, our generation, our parents' generation are kind of the generation of, I want it now, of instant gratification. And I forgot what the rates were for people in debt right now under 40. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a whole, I mean, it goes a lot deeper than a lot of people realize.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to say something about you addressing savings, and I think that starting with, I don't know, whoever was, hitting their early 20s in the early 90s, maybe even before that, but I really wasn't aware of it before that, we're not saving anymore. We're actually being incentivized to go into debt, and that is a whole, there's a common, acknowledgement in just the zeitgeist of today that you get a house, you get a car, you get all the stuff you need. Sometimes you need to go into debt for it, and you'll pay it. But there are predatory lending practices, I think, that went into place in the 80s and 90s that just kind of catapulted it really incentivized the economy. It's like created a big boom in the economy. You can look at the Dow and see how it just went out of control in the 90s. But there's no incentive to save anymore because you can have what you want now. And because you can have what you want now, we have a culture of, I can get it now, and there's no consequence. And that lack of consequence and that lack of accountability is rearing its ugly head in the policies that people are starting to favor today. And this comes back to what you were talking about with, it's really hard to make the right decision for women, especially in the face of free healthcare incentives. Like we say, hey, guess what? You can have free healthcare. You can have free contraception. You can have free abortions. We'll make everybody pay for it. Well, we're paving your way for lack of accountability. You don't have to save. You don't have to plan. You don't have to educate yourself. You don't have to do anything, and the government will take care of you. And I think when you throw away the idea of savings and you throw away the idea of work, you throw all the rest of it away too.
So that leads me back to why decisions for Congress are so important. And if I take your argument to the extreme, before the close of this generation, this country will not exist as my parents knew it. Is that acceptable to y'all?
Completely.
Well, the idea, but I agree with
The
the
idea,
idea, but I don't
like
think
the
I don't
idea.
like it.
So what are you
Make that
going to
clear.
do about it? Because this is, and that's why I'm here. So first off, let me make a very important pitch. I need to go to Congress. I'm well prepared to be there, but I cannot do it without you. And campaigns take one-to-one-to-one contact. And I think it is time that we make sure you are part of the discussion, because there are going to be decisions that are made, and people will hold back. Your decision makers will hold back, thinking, oh, well, I can't speak for you. Well, that's right, you can't, especially because we're going to impose something on you. You need to speak up. And if what you were saying is correct, and I think you are, if you are unwilling to accept where that discussion is going, then we need to get you engaged right now. Right now.
There's wasting people that are our age right now that when you say something, when you start talking about this stuff, I don't want to even think about that right now. And I'm like, well, it's gonna come. You're gonna have to start thinking about it.
Well, and this is purely my opinion, but in my opinion, it terrifies me every day, because if you think about just how we got to this point where our generation is the way they are, their grandparents' generation actually were motivated because they lived it every day. They were, a lot of them impoverished, they had harder times. They saw every day why they should be saving. and then they kind of pass it on to our parents kind of experience that, like their parents not spending a lot on them and their parents doing a lot of saving. So in turn, like our parents pass on to our generation, like we weren't hugged enough, we weren't, you know, so we're babies because they kind of took a 180 from the way they were treated by that generation. So it's almost, to me, it feels like it's an advantage to the Republican Party, the fact that our age group doesn't vote, because it's, well, just sort of the way our generation is sort of more spoiled, kind of feels more entitled, is the give it to me now, and probably would be a lot more would accept like a bigger government like role in their lives a lot more than the older generation would. It's almost, to me, it's almost a good thing that they, at this point, vote in smaller numbers. So I really think that we, like, as college Republicans and just politicians in general, really need to target, like, educating this generation. Because when they do start to vote, I think that they don't have the tools to make an informed decision, because all they think about is them getting the benefits and them getting things, because they always kind of, like, our generation was handed things. Like, I think our generation, more than anyone else, got a car for graduation and got to go to college. Like, we received more privileges from our families than any other generation, and I think people kind of are, like, it's like a mind warp. Like, they don't understand that that was given to you by your family, not by the government. So I think our generation, it's kind of scary to me, because I think that by the time they get their act together and we're like 30 and people start to vote, they're going to vote incorrectly, well, in my opinion, incorrectly, because they do want these handouts, because we're used to getting them now.
So do you think it is possible, if you get mobilized and energized, that you can change the discussion among your peers?
I mean, it's really scary to think that one of our justices, I don't remember her name, but she was,
Kagan.
I think it was to the, are you familiar with telling the European, or not
It
European,
was Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Egyptian government not to
Oh, I
follow?
thought you were talking about Kagan saying it's a boatload of money the government's going to give.
That we should be looking for the South African Constitution.
Yeah, instead of the American Constitution, because our Constitution's very flawed, and, I mean, when you have that kind of outlook coming from a justice, that's a little scary.
So all of you have read the Constitution? That's encouraging. All of your friends have read it?
No.
I hate that they know what it is. It's like a learning
Yeah.
genre. They read it for
Republicans, we're not gonna judge them.
and then I just don't understand, like, so in going to high school in Florida, and like I did like a year of high school here too, you have these like randomly like state mandated strange classes, like New Mexico history. Okay, great.
You took New Mexico history in Florida.
No, like here when I was here, and then like in Florida you take like Florida history, or like a certain number of like stretching classes, but there isn't a class that's like actually giving you the tools to be like an adult. So why, like, we have a health class so we can like learn about like STDs and like proper sexual health, but in turn shouldn't we also, if we're legislating classes now, shouldn't we like do classes, like have classes that are actually benefiting us as adults? Like, how much different would our generation be if we had a class that was about like Ross and was about social, like learning about what Social Security is and what it can be and
It's
things like
definitely
that.
financial class.
Right, so,
Even down to the center.
yeah, right, so like, we're having, I mean,
I
I
think that-
So let me ask you a question. I've had my kids in public schools here and in Florida. So would you be willing to, in Florida, would you, in particular, they require 15 minutes a day for self-esteem training. Would you give that up? Are you willing to give that up? I mean, I just want to know.
I mean, I can say for everyone, I don't need self-esteem
But it's
training, and
gotta
then
be
just, I 15 minutes of waiting, not the same thing. Well, these are, I don't know, it's just silly. I think that a lot of things, I mean, this is getting into education reform, I guess, but like, a lot of things that we are learning, first of all, are inaccurate. Second of all, are like just extraneous, like, special fluff time. Like, let's tell each other how great we are, because our parents don't or something.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm probably sound like super rude and cynical, but I really just think that there are more important things that we could be talking about. Like, we're offering like a golf class, or we're offering, like, I took a photography class. now, like, it is important to have a creative outlet, I'm not saying let's get rid of the arts, but is it not more or equal, like, more important or equally as important to learn how to be a successful adult? Like, I mean, I can learn how to golf, but I'd also like to learn how to not be homeless. You know?
I am going to have to take off here, but I have one more question for you. You know, the role of your representative in Congress is not only to represent what you think, but to still make the decisions to defend this nation. So I'd like to know from you what you expect from your representative.
Communication.
Right.
Yeah.
Your communication and transparency. I think if you get it to our generation straight, I know that sounds kind of blunt, but I think if you say it kind of black and white for us, I think people would be more upfront and be more upfront with their votes.
And I think instead of just campaigning on this whole transparency campaign issue, but just as when you're in office, I mean, actions speak louder than words. We've been promised this transparency over and over, and it's never happened.
I'd say some people talk, some people do.
Right.
I tell you what,
And
let's go on the doing side.
I mean, instead of campaigning on it, I mean, just when you're elected, just make everything as much as you can transparent, and make it public that it was transparent, so that your voters can see, okay, they're not just saying that to get the votes.
Right.
Well, in turn, what can we do for you? Like, what can we do to help you get where you want to be? And because sometimes we struggle with that, like, as a group, we like talk about it, like, what exactly should our goals be, and like, what exactly can we do to help candidates?
And you are a tremendous force right now, so every campaign needs energy. We need, you know, there's the retail politics, knocking on doors, getting excited, the actual doing the heavy lifting. That's a perfect intersection for you. Over the summer, there is a lot of work before you get back to school, because you know, your job right now is to go to school. But in the summertime, and I hope that you will talk with Joshua Carmelo, we'd love to have you named, we would love to have you come and work with us. We are a volunteer-driven campaign. We literally have been going door to door since last August. And you know what I learned as a state legislator is, if you really want to find solutions, go to the door. Because people understand, they'll tell you what the problem is, and quite frankly, they'll tell you how to fix it, if you'll just listen. And you know what? They're right, because they've been there. So there is that part of it that you can do. There is also, you know, clearly the policy discussion part. And so let me invite you right this minute. For the last 4.5 years, I have been hosting something called Conspiracy Brew that you just get up on Saturday morning. But it is, and Zach has even come to Conspiracy Brew. It is, you know, you cannot know everything about your government. And what you learn in this discussion is there are a lot of people who have very different opinions and experiences that you have. And in some areas, they're very, very smart. And there are other places you'll go, well, okay, I don't agree with him. But the wealth of knowledge that we share is really remarkable. And it has lifted other people up to go run for office because they had enough information. And so every Saturday, I hope that you'll think about coming. Southwest Secondary Learning Center. I don't always get to go anymore, but the conversation goes on with or without me, and it really is a problem-solving session. So what I'm hoping that as college Republicans, that you will offer a venue on campus, but even in town, for the Republican candidates to be there. But we invite you to some of our events. We hope you'll come. We have a hard time making sure that there are people there that don't have gray hair. That's the truth, or hair at all, sorry. And we would like for you to come. And I don't, you know, even on the fundraising list, we understand that for fundraisers, you may say, oh, I can't go because it's $50 or whatever. If we invite you because we want you to be there, and we will move those impediments because your perspective is important. And you know, the other side of us old fogies, we feel cut off because we're not talking with you. So if we're missing the message, if we're missing the actual points that we need to be talking about, I need to talk to you. And so I hope that you'll come and join us. We have a team meeting every Wednesday. You are so invited, if you're interested, and I'd go ahead and pass those out. We would love to have you join us. We're laying out and actually starting to walk already. I know it seems early. If you are interested in helping to build a campaign to move it forward, we're doing that too. You know, there's all of the pieces of a campaign, but at the end of the day, what we still have to mobilize are real people who will talk to our real neighbors. And you were the best to be able to do this. Anyway, I thank you so much for
Well,
having
thank you for coming, really.
I didn't expect such a really terrific discussion, and I hope you'll invite me back again.
Oh, absolutely. We love having you come to this, we always have a great discussion when you come, so.
Well, I would say that there are so many other policy issues, and maybe we could focus in, if you'll invite me back again, let's focus in on some of the really tough ones. We never got to national defense. We didn't get to education, we didn't get to immigration or to border security, all big issues. And I'd love to hear your perspective.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, you're doing a good job. More about the volunteers. All the volunteers came to our.
There's a party when I'm here.
Oh, I do.
Just watch the track as a track.
And I'm grateful that
Yeah?
you're here.